So you make a flight plan through SimBrief, you execute it in your flight simulator, and at cruising altitude, when you're analyzing the arrival, you realize that the arrival route to the airport doesn't directly connect to the approach path. What now? Yo, what's up? My name is Manuel, and we talk about aviation religiously on this channel. For today's topic, we're gonna discuss how ATC vectors you from the standard terminal arrival route into the approach path, together with how often this happens. So here's what you have to understand. A vector is a three-dimensional path that air traffic control specifically instructs you to follow. And it happens pretty much in any part of the flight. It could happen, in the middle of the cruising altitude or in the departure and the arrival. It could happen anywhere. And there are many reasons that they could occur, such as most of the time it's because there's a lot of traffic and ATC wants to avoid that. And there's also weather. There could be a thunderstorm that's directly in your flight path and you have to avoid it. And those are some of the reasons, but one of the most common is that there is absolutely no designated path. So what do I mean by this? In most IFR flights, instrument flight rules flights, uh, pilots fly through airways. If you know what an airway is, I've already made a video talking about that, check it out. And and you have to, and so, I mean, basically the definition of airways is they're imaginary routes across certain parts of a region that aircraft use for standard or horizontal IFR guidance. In other words, they're highways. They're highways in the sky, and those are standardized routes for aircraft to fly. Just as cars fly through, I mean fly, drive through standardized routes that are called highways. That is how they happen. And yes, in those cases, they don't need vectors. They have already had their designated flight path, and there's no reason at all. ATC doesn't have to intervene. But when the airway ends and you still haven't reached the approach path, or at least that is when you need ATC vectors. And what you have to understand is that there are times that they do in fact directly connect normally, and I say normally because in Europe that is like the most common thing. The arrival route directly connects to the approach path, but there are also times when it's common that they don't actually connect. And in the USA is more common that that ATC has to vector you to the approach. So how do they work? Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, I'm gonna explain it very briefly, and I'm gonna show you an example using a chart, a standardized chart that the pilots use. And basically, ATC instructs you by setting the autopilot which specific heading, specific altitude, specific speed, or even specific vertical speed to go. Here we are at Navigraph charts, and you can see that, I mean, first of all, this was a flight they did a long time ago, and you can see that these runways are not used right now, so don't get surprised. But what you can see here is that here is an airway. The arrival route is actually considered an airway because it's a standardized route that aircraft use to arrive at the airport, the destination. So here we could imagine ourselves flying, you can see, and then boom, we end up at LaGuardia, at the LaGuardia VOR, and we have nowhere else to go. And this is the approach path we are expecting to land at runway 4 left. So yes, that is an issue because this straight line doesn't actually help because we're gonna have to make a very steep turn over here at an arrow key and then fly to the approach, which is not efficient at all and not safe at all. So what ATC automatically takes control of this if you're flying IFR, and you have to obey what ATC tells you, you have ATC basically tells you to turn right. You have to turn right, maybe directly, maybe a little bit over here, not going nearby to this area of Manhattan, but just avoiding certain restricted airspaces or traffic. Go through a heading, and then ATC will instruct you to obviously descend, because at arrow key there is a specific altitude that you have to be in order to catch the glide slope or the glide path. We already talked about it in another video. And so yeah, it's very simple. ATC has to direct you to a the safest path possible, avoiding traffic, avoiding restricted airspace, etc. And in order to arrive at arrow key first, if there's, I mean, if there's nothing to avoid, I mean, if there's not a lot of traffic, which is something quite rare in JFK Airport, you have to. What most likely happens is that you follow over here, and you go at the reciprocal direction of the runway, through right next to the approach path, and then you slowly turn into a 180 at arrow key, and then you basically connect yourself to the approach, which is pretty straightforward. And I hope you understand by this, because that is all there is with ATC vectors. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments so we can discuss it in a future video, or directly in the comment section, depending on how on how deep the topic actually goes. I highly encourage you to subscribe to not miss any potential knowledge of aviation, which is quite essential, especially for your flight simulator. So with all that said and done, we'll see you in the next one. Happy flying.